There you go.
Okay. Okay. Perek Yud Aleph, Parshas Bo. That's one perek we're going to do today. Page 346 in your Chumashim. It's the prelude to the 10th and final plague. Everybody has it, page 346, Perek Yud Aleph. Vayomer Hashem o Moshe, od nega echad avi al Paro v'al Mitzrayim, acharei kein yishalach eschem mizeh, kishalcho kolo garash yigaresh eschem mizeh. Hashem said to Moshe, one more plague shall I bring upon Paro and upon Egypt. After that, he shall send you forth from here. When he sends you, it shall be complete. He shall drive you out of here. Daber na ba'aznei ha'am. And now, please speak to the people. V'yisha'alu ish me'et re'eu, v'isha me'et re'uta, klei chesed u'klei zahav. And let each man request of his fellow man, from each woman, from her fellow, silver vessels and gold vessels. Vayitain Hashem eschein ha'am beinei Mitzrayim, gam ha'ish Moshe gadol me'od be'eretz Mitzrayim beinei avdei Paro u'veinei ha'am. Hashem granted the people favor in the eyes of Egypt. Moreover, the man Moshe was very great in the land of Egypt, in the eyes of the servants of Paro, in the eyes of the people. Moshe, the Torah is telling us, was considered. Continue on. Now, Rabbi. Just a few psukim. Perek Yud Aleph is a very short perek. Vayomer Moshe, ko amar Hashem kach hatzot halayla ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim. Moshe said, so says Hashem, at about midnight, kach hatzot halayla ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim, I shall go out in the midst of Egypt. Umeit kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim bechor Paro hayoshev al kiso ad bechor hashivcha asher achad harechoyim bechol bechor behema. And every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Paro, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of a maidservant who's behind the millstone, and all the firstborn of the beast as well. There shall be a great outcry in the entire land of Egypt, such as there's never been before, and there never will be again. 1 second, when I lost my place. Oh, okay. Ulechol yid b'nei pasuk zayin. Ulechol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shomo l'mi'ish ba'beima l'man teidun ki asher yifaleh Hashem bein Mitzrayim uvein Yisrael. But against all the children of Israel, no dog shall be heard. Right, and the dogs will be silent against neither man nor beast, so that you shall know that Hashem will have differentiated between Egypt and Israel. V'yardu kol avodecha ele alai v'yishtachavu li lemor tzei ata v'chol ha'am asher b'raglecha v'acharechein eitzei v'yitzei mi'iparo b'chari off. Then all the servants of yours will come down to me and bow to me, saying, leave, you the entire people that follows you. And after that, I will leave. And he left Paro's presence in a burning anger. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe lo yishma lechem Paro l'man revot moftai be'eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem says to Moshe, Paro will not heed you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moshe and Aaron performed all of these wonders before Paro. And God hardened the heart of not send out the children of Israel from his land. That's Perek Yud Aleph. Perek Yud Aleph is a fascinating chapter in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's the chapter that wants us to understand that there are some profound aspects to Yetziat Mitzrayim, to Exodus itself, and to the plagues that only a very close reading of the psukim can discern. Without focusing on these psukim in Perek Yud Aleph, you're going to miss certain aspects that pertain to Yetziat Mitzrayim and the plagues. And the Rav focused on our interest in these not so obvious to the story, wanting us to pay close attention to them. So let's take a look. Let's start at Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Aleph. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, od nega echad avi Paro, od nega echad avi Paro. I'm going to bring one more plague. The Rav notes, did we ever step back for a moment and think? We all know the story. So we all know how many plagues are there? 10. But this is the first time we're being told there are 10. Nowhere in the story was Moshe or Bnei Yisrael told there are going to be 10 plagues and then you're going out. Nowhere. This is the first time. Oh, nega echad avi al paro. This is the first time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe the number 10 is going to be the secret number, if you will, for the plagues. It's only after the 9th plague, right? After Choshech, that he's informed that it's going to be total 10. Furthermore, Hashem hasn't revealed when Exodus is even going to occur. Moshe has no idea. Moshe is not told, in 5 weeks, we're going to have Yetziat Mitzrayim. He's not told that. He's not told at all. And this isn't the only place that a lack of what is going to occur beforehand is kept secret from us. It also happens in the Midbar itself. We never know when we're going to travel and when we're going to stay in a location and when we're going to get up and when we're going to move. It's totally uncertain to us. We have to wait to find out. Why is this secretive arrangement so important to the story of Exodus and then to our wandering in Mitzrayim, in the Midbar? And the Rav noted that the uncertainty throughout the story of Exodus and the movement in the desert developed our bitachon in Hashem. It's our faith in Hashem comes from this. We had to believe that Hashem was in control, right? Because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's so crucial to this story. And that's why we're not told before, we're not. The truth is, I don't think you'd stop anybody, and everybody knows it's 10. But ask them, when did we find out it's 10? Right here in Perek Yud Aleph. Only after Choshech are we. There's one more. It's going to be 10. Okay, so that's number 1. That's lesson number 1. Then continues on in Pasuk Base. Then what happens? Daber no b'oznei ha'am. Now God says, go speak, please, to the people of the Oznei ha'am means go speak to them. Go tell them. What are they being told? V'yisha'alu ish me'et re'eu v'isha me'et re'uta klei chesef u'klei zahav. Just translate those words. And what are they being asked to do? Go v'yisha'alu. What is v'yisha'alu usually translated as? Borrow. Was this a trick? Is this a game? We'd have no intention of returning anything. What do you mean you say borrow? I always tell people to say, can I borrow a Kleenex? I said, no, you can't have a Kleenex. I'm not interested in you returning the Kleenex after you use it. No, but you can have it. You want to take? Can I have it? Vishalu seems to mean borrow. Is this a Jewish trick? That the non-Jews anti-Semitically have always said, oh, you see, the Jews never playing games. They're never honest. Vishalu ish me'et re'eu. Right? Me'et re'eu. V'isha me'et uta. Was that a joke? Was that some kind of a trick?
It also mean request or ask for.
Oh, so let's see what it means. Right? So Rav Soloveitchik quotes Shamshin Raphael Hirsch. Shamshin Raphael Hirsch explains, it all depends on how you translate the word v'yisha'alu. The word can mean, and they should borrow. Yes, it can. Or it can mean, and they should ask. V'yisha'alu can mean, and they should ask, Hirsch notes. And what else? It all depends upon the preposition following the verb. It matters which preposition you have following the verb. To appreciate this, the Rav takes us to Parshas Mishpatim, where if you take a look in Perek Chof Beis, Pasuk Yud Gimel, so let's go to Mishpatim, Perek Chof Beis, Pasuk Yud Gimel, on page 428, right? V'chi yishal ish me'im re'ehu v'nishbar omet v'chi yishal me'im re'ehu, which translates, and there it means borrows from his neighbor. If you're just to halachos pertaining to borrowing, right? Mishamar chinam, shamar sacha, etc., there. V'chi yishal ish me'im re'ehu. If a person borrows from his neighbor. We know this, it must mean, the Hirsch notes, and Rav Soloveitchik points it out, that it must mean to borrow there, because what's the preposition after Me'im. What's me'im mean? Me'im means from, right? When that's from. Well, you're borrowing somebody. When, however, the preposition is here, what is the here in this pasuk? V'yishalu me'et re'uta, right? V'yishalu ish me'et re'eu v'uta. Me'et cannot mean to borrow, rather means to ask. And that's why he says, if this is correct, then we weren't borrowing with no intention of returning. That's not true. This is a poor translation if you're going to say ish, that we were borrowing from the Egyptians. Anything. We were asking them, please give it to us. We're going to leave with it. And they had to give it to us. We had no intention whatsoever. And the word never meant that. We never were borrowing anything from them. Lesson number 2. Continues on to Pasuk Gimel, the Rav notes. Vayitain Hashem eschena am be'enei Mitzrayim, gam ish Moshe gadol ma'od be'eretz Mitzrayim, be'nei avdei paro u'venei ha'am. And the Moshe, and this man Moshe, right? This is a description of Moshe through whose eyes, by the way, from whose perspective. And so the Rav points out some very important lessons in this pasuk. I should stop. I should ask, what do you think this is telling us about Moshe and this pasuk? Right? So everybody, that resolves the pasuk before says we're going to go and ask. Oh yeah, and they gave it to us. That's saying we had no problem getting what we asked. But then it says, the Torah is telling us this about Moshe because one must wonder, in the whole story, remember, this is coming now, the plagues are coming to an end, correct? And you have to ask yourself, you scratch your head and you wonder, how in the world did Moshe and Aharon have a free pass into the palace of Paro whenever they deemed appropriate? They could come and go and had audiences with Paro whenever they pleased. And Paro only now, right before Makas Bechoro, says, if you dare come, the next time I'm going to kill you. Did he say that after Dam, Sfardeya, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shmin, Barod, right? He didn't do that. Arbe, now, finally, so you wonder, how did Moshe and Aaron have the ability to come and go to Paro's palace and do whatever they want? And on top of it, if you think about it, and they reproached the most powerful man in the world. They didn't come and just ask or tell. They reproached. They really didn't even ask except one thing, let our people go, right? But they were reproaching the most powerful man in the world, and they were able to do it. So the Torah tells us the answer, tells it to us right here in this pasuk. The Rav notes, this fact should not be ignored because it's honestly one of the greatest miracles of the Exodus story. We think of the 10 plagues as the miracle, right? Kriyas Yamsuf as the miracle, Yitzias Mitzrayim itself as the miracle. And the Rav says, if you were asking me, I would tell you one of the greatest miracles of the Exodus story is the free pass that Moshe and I into the palace. And you're being told right here in this pasuk, how did it happen? How did it happen? So this informs us, the Torah is informing us that Moshe had what the Rav calls a great charisma. It impressed everyone he met. Everyone Moshe met was impressed by him. He had this charisma that has never been also impressed by Moshe. Clearly, he didn't harm Moshe at all because he was overwhelmed by Moshe's personality. He perceived Moshe as the Gadol Ma'od, as even bigger than, and remember, he had this Paro, thinking of himself as the most powerful man. But when he came up against Moshe, he had to admit, this is not a usual regular man. Moshe had this personality that was overwhelming from everybody that met him. And that's what the Torah is telling us. And the Torah is telling us that this is a crucial element to the story. This corrected to, by the way, with the honorific of one word. Take a look in this pasuk. Tell me what's the word. What's the next word? Ha'ish Moshe. Ha'ish Moshe. Ha'ish is a word which really represents a charisma, an unusual. Ha'ish. There's not only here in reference to Moshe, but in reference to Moshe, it's going to appear 2 more times in the whole Torah. The first time, if you can go to Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk Aleph, Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk Aleph, in Isa. Lamed Beis, Pasuk Aleph, 492, right? Vayar ha'am kivoshesh Moshe loredas mina ar. What was Moshe went up for the 40 days to receive the Torah, and we miscalculated, right? So we thought it was the 40th day. Moshe is dilly-dallying. Why is Vayikahel ha'am al haron vayamru elav kum aseh lanu Elohim asher yalchu lefanenu ki zeh Moshe ha'ish. When they miscalculated, figuring out when Moshe was to return, they called it Moshe Ha'ish, that charismatic individual. Moshe hasn't returned. Now what are we going to do, right? So that's point 1. And then if you go to Bamidbar, Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Gimel. Does anybody remember Perek Yud Beis? Pasuk Yud Gimel? It's the story of Miriam in Lashon Hara against her brother. And what does she say at the end of the Halospa Perek Yud Beis? Pasuk Gimel, page 794 in the Chumashim. She said she was critical of her brother, right? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu informs us, the divine narrator says, Va'ish, you go the third time, right? Va'ish Moshe Anav Ma'od. That charismatic individual, Ha'ish, Moshe is Anav Ma'od. So what is this telling us? This is giving us a description of a Moshe that was able to go in and out of the palace without being stopped. He had a free pass. But there's one more aspect the Rav is teaching us, and we should not ignore this. And it was a revolution of its time. I told you, in these psukim, the Rav is reading these psukim so carefully that it has material that we don't pay close attention to when we understand the whole story of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the plagues. And the Rav says here, it sheds light upon the difference between the Egyptian pagans and their attitude towards life and the Jewish attitude towards. The Torah tells us here that Moshe was respected by the Egyptians. Read the pasuk carefully. Let's go back to our pasuk, Perek Yud Aleph in Parshas Bo. And what do we have? Second. Vayitein Hashem eschena am beinei Mitzrayim. Gam ha'ish Moshe ma'od be'eretz Mitzrayim. Beinei avdei paro u'v'nei ha'am. This is a revolution. They perceived Moshe, even though he's the ha'ish, the charismatic individual, he's still human. And that is unusual. This is crucial because we would have expected a different outlook by the Egyptian pagans. They were pagans, and their natural tendency, anybody who had such charisma, such power, they would look at him as a god, as a godhead of the pantheon, right? But that's not how they viewed Moshe. And that was a revolution. They saw Moshe as we saw Moshe. End of the day, not a god, but Moshe, a human being with failings, right? With everything that comes with being a human being. And the Rav notes that this is a revolutionary. The first time, and I quote the Rav, it was the first time in pagan history that a man was considered, if you're great in their eyes, you must be a deity. No man is great. In other words, there are men and they're gods, and the gods are, man is a failure. This is all the Greek mythology, right?
Right.
We have a concept. No. Ish Moshe Gadol Ma'od. A human being can arrive at a level where he can be Gadol Ma'od. He's not going to be a god, but he can be the ultimate human being possible.
I wonder how they viewed Yosef, who saved Egypt.
Yeah,
Famine.
we're not told. We're not that Yosef is ever considered ish. Only Moshe. Moshe has this power. Yosef was not in comparison to Moshe.
Right.
Right. Okay. Now continue on. Okay, so that's all of the introduction. Now, Vayomer Moshe Ko Amar Hashem. Now it's coming down to Yetziat Mitzrayim. Well, now we're getting close to Yetziat Mitzrayim. Vayomer Moshe Ko Amar Hashem. So Moshe says, "This is what Hashem said." Kachatzot halayla ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim. Kachatzot halayla. Translate those words. Kachatzot halayla, around midnight, give or take. Right? Around midnight, a minute before, kachatzot halayla. Everybody, cool your liver, right? Kachatzot halayla, that kind of stuff. So Rashi already notes that Hashem didn't say kachatzot halayla. When Hashem speaks, it's bachatzot halayla. Bachatzot halayla. In Hashem's world, it wasn't a half a second early or half a second late. It was precisely midnight. But precision is only divine. Precision is not human. Human is with error. We're a little off. We can. Only God can be precise. And that's very, isn't it, for man to realize that he lacks precision in his calculations. Kachatzot, the best man can say is kachatzot. Nevertheless, as humbling as it might be, it teaches the Rav notes. First and foremost, the lesson is that the Jew has to be a sensitive being. He has to have an ability to know time. The Rav noted, and I quote the Rav, to be a good Jew, one has to be a disciplined Jew. And to be a disciplined Jew, one has to develop disciplined time awareness. It's a profound insight. And this is, by the way, all of the, not only to the end of the plagues, but it is the introduction to the next parak. Parak Yud, what's the parak Yud base? Rosh Chodesh, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem is what? Is the ultimate in time awareness. It's the halacha of halachas, right? HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem is the first mitzvah that we are commanded to as people. Up until then, and that's why the Rashi famously asks, we started the Torah with HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. What do you mean HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem? We had Bris Milah before. Bris Milah was commanded to individuals. HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem is to the people. The Am B'nai Yisrael is now developing. Up until now, we didn't have an Am. Now we have an Am. And we're being taught as a nation that we as a nation must be time sensitive, time aware. Judaism insists that we run our lives with a clock, or as the Rav would say, with a stopwatch. We do. Because Judaism is precise. Our religion is a measurement-sensitive religion. Time sensitive to the ultimate. It is mathematically scientific like no other. It's true, it's mathematical. We are always concerned about mathematical calculations. In the words of the Rav, to miss one calculation, one tiny infinitesimal fraction of time is identical with treachery, with deceit. Those are heavy-duty words, right? You miss it off by 1 second. Yep. And I experienced this past Friday when Rucham and I were celebrating our 40th anniversary, and we went to Panama. So on Friday, last Erev Shabbos, on Friday afternoon, we decided we're going to take an Uber from our hotel to the Ashkenazic shul. Most of Panama is Sephardic. And there's one Ashkenazic shul, it has 1,000 seats in it, but there's 1,000 Ashkenazic shul called Beit. But it's a bit of a walk from the hotel. So we figured, okay, to the shul, we're going to be walking home and then back again the next day and back again. Okay, to shul on Friday afternoon, we'll take an Uber. And Ubers are very inexpensive in Panama, so it's no big thing. It's too, you just go. Okay, so we get into the Uber. We had enough time. I knew exactly what time shki is, but I didn't calculate the traffic. In Panama City, the traffic is horrendous. So I was sitting right next to the driver, and Rechama and another person was in the back, we're all going to the shul, and the car's not moving anywhere. We get in and we move 2 feet from the hotel, and it's just not moving. And I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I know exactly what time Shkia is. Thinking to myself, at what point am I going to say to him, stop, we're out? He's going to think we're crazy, but stop, we're out. We understand it. He doesn't understand it. I'm calculating exactly what time I'm going to be jumping at, and the anxiety-ridden moment inside me, I'm reliving it as I'm telling you the story. You're looking, and Shkia is 6:18. It's 6:18, not 6:19. 6:19, it's Shabbos. 6:17, it's Friday. 6:18, bingo. It's Bachatzot, right? It is exact. I was so anxious. Everyone else would say to you, so what if you're a few minutes late? Big Gadilla, the Spanish driver, if you wouldn't understand me anyhow, right? Everyone would say, who cares about a minute this way or a minute that way? Did you know there is no such allowance? 1 minute before Friday, 1 minute after sunset is Shabbos. 1 minute on Saturday afternoon, it's still Shabbos. 1 minute after Tzeis HaKochavim, it's already Saturday night. We are time sensitive like no one else. And perhaps if you think about it, historically, it dawned on me, what was the major argument that the Misnagdim had against Hasidus? Time. The major thing that the Misnagdim, there were two issues, but the other issue was the deifying of the Rebbe, making the Rebbe so important a personality that we never had that kind of relationship with another human being, that you turn to the Rebbe for everything. But anyhow, okay. But the first and Misnagdim had against the Hasidim, here's your time sensitivity. A frum Jew is time sensitive. And they were honestly really concerned that Hasidus was playing down sensitivity, this time awareness. Sukkim are telling us. Next, I want to point out also, furthermore, we have to know, center of the Pesach celebration is time sensitivity par excellence. Time sensitivity, of course, you can think of it. You'll think about it in terms of matzah, right? While you're baking the matzah, if the matzah is let to rise too long, what happens to the matzah? It's no longer matzah, it becomes chametz, right? That's matzah. But essential to the celebration of Pesach, in particular when the Beis Hamikdash existed, was the Korban Pesach. What's the Korban Pesach? A time awareness. The difference between before Chatzot or after Chatzot is world-shattering for the Jew, right? If the Korban Pesach was slaughtered before Chatzot on Erev Pesach, it cannot be used, right? After Chatzot, it's kosher as a Korban Pesach. We are so time sensitive in everything we do. So you can say, well, how does that sensitivity manifest itself now that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash? We're still time sensitive. According to Rav Elazar ben Azariah, one must finish eating matzah and maror, afikoman, by what time on the Seder night? There's a machlokas. Okay, so different minhagim. But the whole discussion, Rav Elazar ben Azariah says, you have to be finished with your afikoman by Chatzot HaLayla. This also happens with other. If you think about korbanot, they have a day and a night. 1 day, 1 full day and a night. After the day and night has passed, what happens to the korban? The korban becomes usser. It becomes defiled. It becomes forbidden. It must be burnt. You can't. No, you had a day and a night to eat it, and you let over part of it during that period of time, a day and a night, Yom V'Layla, it's over. You can't do it again. I'm reading a fascinating biography by a very successful Jewish American, and he's describing, I'm just started it, but he's describing while he was growing up in his non-religious family, that that they really were not religious. I mean, he describes it in detail. He says, we weren't religious, but we observed certain things. We observed, we didn't go to work and we didn't go to school on Yom Kippur. We didn't go to shul either, he says. We stayed home and we watched TV, but we didn't go to shul. No, and they right, whatever they did, he doesn't describe that, but he describes, and we observed Pesach, Passover. But in our family, Passover was always on Saturday night. That's when the family got together. When it was during Passover, but it wasn't Seder night. But that's when we took out Maxwell House Coffee Haggadah, and we read it in 15 minutes, and that was the Seder. But the Seder was always Saturday. And when you read that as an observant Jew, you cringe with the absurdity of that act. How can you observe a Seder? Hey, it's Saturday night. It's Saturday Night Live, right? It's Saturday Night Live, right? It's unbelievable, right? You can't. To us, it's a mockery of Kachatzot Halayla. That message, in the words of the Rav. This is a basic idea and perhaps the most central idea of our Voltenschank. We have a unique sensitivity for time that no one else has, for the exactitude of time, for the passing of time, and a readiness to live in accordance with the obligations of time. That's what we have. We have a sensitivity to time that no one else has. So when I read that story, I thought, mockery of time awareness. These people weren't knowledgeable of that. They were Tinoko, Shanishbu. They were totally ignorant of that. But as an Orthodox observant Jew, here, all of this is deduced from two words in this parak, kachatzot al, or in God's formulation, bachatzot alayla. This is all of an introduction to the next, right? To the next part of the Torah, which is HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. So just to wrap it up, it's a little shorter than usual. Perek Yud Aleph is a short perek, but Perek Yud Aleph is replete with important lessons to the story. Number one, we did that it was 10. Moshe did not know when he started Dam, that there were going to be another 9 after that, right? When does he find out that it's going to be 10? Only after 9. Then, nega achad. Why? And also in the story of the Midbar, we were never told when we were going to move. There was no, guys, you should know in 3 days we're going, I knew how long I was going to be in Panama, right? I was going to be in Panama. I mean, as much as a human being can know, I knew, right? I knew when my ticket was to go back home. You're there 5 days, you're there 5 days. But I go in with that, not here to teach us what? A lesson in bitachon and Hashem. That was lesson 1 that HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught us here. Lesson number 2, the argument of the Yishalu Ish Me'et Re'eu, the Isha Me'et Ru'utah, that we borrowed, and that it was a trick, and it's a source of tremendous anti-Semitism, by the way. Those biblical scholars who are anti-Semites, you see, the Jews were never honest. No, the Yishalu Ish. It's totally dependent upon how you translate Yishalu. The Yishalu can mean borrow, and it can mean ask. I'm sorry? It can mean borrow, or it can mean ask, and it's all dependent upon the preposition that follows it. So Vishalu me'im would be borrow. Vishalu me'et would be ask. And they asked. Then the Torah tells us that Bnei Israel received no problem, no static getting that which they asked, but something else. The Torah describes how the Mitzrim and how everybody viewed Moshe. And why is that important to the story? So the Rav says, this might be one of the greatest miracles that nobody's really paying close attention to in telling the story of Mitzrayim, but you got to ask yourself, how did Moshe and Aaron get a free pass to go into the palace whenever they wanted? And on top of it, They reproached Pharaoh, powerful man, right? So what's the answer that the Torah has? It's telling us Gam Ha'ish Moshe Gadol Ma'od. It's giving us one word, which is going to repeat itself 2 more times in the Torah. Ha'ish Moshe. Ha'ish means the charismatic individual. Had a charisma that even Pharaoh was strict. He was impressed by. And Moshe wasn't just a regular individual in that sense. He had a charisma that was so overwhelming. However, at the very end, Pharaoh's going to say, don't you dare come or else I'm going to kill you, right? At the very end, he loses his patience with Moshe. But what does that tell us about Moshe? So the Rav points out, it reflects a revolution in between the Jews, how we view a human being, no matter how great he is, and Moshe is the greatest human being ever to live, and how the pagan Egyptians would have viewed him. If you're so great, what would have they made you? A god. And they didn't. Even they realized, but the Jews only looked at Moshe as Ha'ish Moshe, and that's who he was, even in their eyes. That a man can attain greatness but level, correct? On a human level. And then finally, the Torah tells us Kachatzot HaLayla, which we spent a good amount of time on. Kachatzot HaLayla is the introduction to HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, because it's telling us and teaching us that a Jew is time-sensitive time. He has a time awareness like no one else. And that sensitivity is what makes the Jew, if you will, radically sensitive when it comes to time. Like I keep on saying, a minute before Shkia on Friday, it's Friday. A minute after, it's Shabbos. And you don't want to mess up, right?
I remember my father saying.
What?
My father would say that he was raised in an Orthodox home, but he wasn't himself. But I
Right.
remember when I became conservative, sometimes he'd tell me, minute before, Shabbos, it's Friday, and after it's Shabbos.
Nat Lewin tells the story about when he clerked for, I think he clerked for Marshall, Judge Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Thurgood Marshall. I think it was a Friday, and he looks down, and the judge looks down and he says, Nat, the clock is moving. Get out of here. Yeah. He knew. I just, when you do, when the story was that, and Nat Lewin tells the story of how he came to clerk, and he was afraid to tell him, on his introduction, he's being interviewed, that I'm not going to be here, he's being interviewed towards the end of the summer. So Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. Oh my God, how am I going to tell him I'm going to be missing? So I think the story goes that he looks at his bio and he says, I see you grew up and you went, to Yeshiva University High School, and he went to Yeshiva University too. You're an Orthodox Jew, right? He says, yeah. He says, observe Shabbos. He says, yes. The holidays are coming up. Yes. He says, no problem. He says, Judge, how do you know about? And that means all of the holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, they're all coming up, right? He says, yeah, but how do you know, Judge? He says, I was the Shabbos Clay in Baltimore for the community. That's what I was. So anyhow, but he understood a Jew has to be sensitive to time. And that's what we're learning as an introduction to the next chapter, which is HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. Okay, we'll continue next week. Okay, that's it for today.
Rabbi.
Okay, you got it. Everybody should have a wonderful day.
The word Golden Shaft, that means